In our discussion of racial solidarity of immigrant groups and the economic growth and opportunities it engenders for them, we do not wish to leave the impression that Black Americans are not capable of or have not experienced racial solidarity and its associated economic outcomes. Racial solidarity and self-help have a lengthy history in the Black American community and were periodically intense in the years following Reconstruction. It is no coincidence that this period was also characterized by a heavy emphasis on economic development and activity as major means of solving the economic and social problems confronting the recently emancipated Black community. August Meyer in 1966 informs us that the Negro conventions of the late 1870s also placed the strongest emphasis on racial solidarity, self-help, and economic advancement. He goes on to intimate that the delegates, many of them the most distinguished leaders in the Negro community, were more concerned with self-help and economic development than with the decline of political and civil rights. Meyer takes note of John Wesley Cromwell's advice to the Black American community as editor of the People's Advocate, that in the name of racial patriotism, Blacks should award their work to colored men, even where whites would perform it more cheaply, in order to build up colored tradesmen to the point where they could compete with whites. During the 1880s and 1890s, the emphasis on race pride and unity grew immensely in popularity. This emphasis on race pride was accompanied by an increased emphasis on race history. The increased interest in and writing of race history was primarily designed to refute the myth of Black racial inferiority as perpetuated by racist whites, as well as stimulate racial solidarity. Hence, these motives coalesce to form a general movement which might be referred to as cultural nationalism. For prominent Black writers and orators frequently used the term nation or nationality when referring to the Black community of that time. Meyer also noted that in the years between the Compromise of 1877, which involved the withdrawal of the federal protection of rights and privileges of Blacks in the South, and the Compromise of 1895, Booker T. Washington's capitulation to white domination in the New South, emphasized upon race loyalty, race pride, and racial solidarity upon a sort of cultural pluralism, all evidence of ethnoculturalism or nationalism visibly increased. The idea of nationalism was frequently expressed, for example, in connection with the appeal to economic racial solidarity. The high tide of Black American entrepreneurialism and the operational establishment of corporate cities, industries, small businesses and shops, professional services, schools and universities, as well as a high level of inventions by Black inventors, reflected the emphasis on Black pride, dating from the failure of Reconstruction to the advent of Marcus Garvey in the 1920s. Evidence of this phenomenon was still fairly strong in many areas until the late 1950s and early 1960s. A perusal of our review of Black entrepreneurial history in the following chapters will substantiate our claims relative to the late 1800s and the early 1900s. Thus, it is evident that the conscious race solidarity, a certain level of ethnocentrism, and nationness are as necessary to the entrepreneurialism, economic growth, and development of African Americans and Africans world over as they are to non-African immigrants, white Americans, and other ethnic groups elsewhere. If African American entrepreneurialism, economic growth, and development are to occur again and reach the levels necessary not only for economic prosperity, but for the liberation from white domination, then African Americans' race, solidarity, and nationalism must also be revived. For the first is not possible without the second. This means that racial solidarity must be adopted by all classes of African Americans, especially and including the relatively wealthy and black bourgeoisie class. 4. To a very significant extent, the failure of the black elite, the black wealthy, and the influentials to support the concept and activities denoting racial solidarity, self-help, and group economy, along with the rest of Black America, spells doom for the liberation hopes of African peoples both at home and abroad.